It is difficult to describe in words an invention so complicated as the bobbin-net machine. It was, indeed, a mechanical pillow for making lace, imitating in an ingenious manner the motions of the lace-maker's fingers in intersecting or tying the meshes of the lace upon her pillow. On analyzing the component parts of a piece of handmade lace, Heathcote was enabled to classify the threads into longitudinal and diagonal. He began his experiments by fixing common pack threads lengthwise on a sort of frame for the warp, and then passing the whiffed threads between them by common pliers, delivering them to other pliers on the opposite side. Then, after giving them a sideways motion and twist, the threads were repassed back between the next adjoining cords, the meshes being thus tied in the same way as upon pillows by hand. He had then to contrive a mechanism that should accomplish all these nice and delicate movements, and to do this cost him no small amount of mental toil. Long after he said, the single difficulty of getting the diagonal threads to twist in the allotted space was so great that if it had now to be done, I should probably not attempt its accomplishment. His next step was to provide thin metallic discs, to be used as bobbins for conducting the threads backwards and forwards through the warp. These discs, being arranged in carrier frames placed on each side of the warp, were moved by suitable machinery so as to conduct the threads from side to side and forming the lace. He eventually succeeded in working out his principle with extraordinary skill and success. And, at the age of 24, he was enabled to secure his invention by a patent. During this time his wife was kept in almost as great anxiety as himself, for she well knew of his trials and difficulties while he was striving to perfect his invention. Many years after they had been successfully overcome, the conversation which took place one eventful evening was vividly remembered. "Well," said the anxious wife, "will it work?" "No," was the sad answer. "I have had to take it all to pieces again." Though he could still speak hopefully and cheerfully, his poor wife could restrain her feelings no longer, but sat down and cried bitterly. She had, however, only a few more weeks to wait, for a success long labored for and richly deserved, came at last, and a proud and happy man was John Heathcote when he brought home the first narrow strip of bobbin-net made by his machine, and placed it in the hands of his wife. As in the case of nearly all inventions which have proved productive, Heathcote's rights as a patentee were disputed, and his claims as an inventor called in question. On the supposed invalidity of the patent, the lace makers boldly adopted the bobbin-net machine, and set the inventor at defiance. But other patents were taken out for alleged improvements and adaptations. And it was only when these new patentees fell out and went to law with each other that Heathcote's rights became established. One lace manufacturer having brought an action against another for an alleged infringement of his patent, the jury brought in a verdict for the defendant, in which the judge concurred, on the ground that both the machines in question were infringements of Heathcote's patent. It was on the occasion of this trial, Beauville v. Moore, that Sir John Copley, afterwards Lord Lyndhurst, who was retained for the defense in the interest of Mr. Heathcote, learned to work the bobbin-net machine in order that he might master the details of the invention. On reading over his brief, he confessed that he did not quite understand the merits of the case. But as it seemed to him to be one of great importance, he offered to go down into the country forthwith and study the machine until he understood it. "And then," said he, "I will defend you to the best of my ability." He accordingly put himself into that night's mail, and went down to Nottingham to get up his case as perhaps counsel never got it up before. Next morning the learned sergeant placed himself in a lace loom, and he did not leave it until he could deftly make a piece of bobbin-net with his own hands, and thoroughly understood the principle as well as the details of the machine. When the case came on for trial, the learned sergeant was enabled to work the model on the table with such case and skill, and to explain the precise nature of the invention with such felicitous clearness, as to astonish alike judge, jury, and spectators. And the thorough conscientiousness and mastery with which he handled the case had no doubt its influence upon the decision of the court. After the trial was over, Mr. Heathcote, on inquiry, found about 600 machines at work after his patent, and he proceeded to levy royalty upon the owners of them, which amounted to a large sum. But the profits realized by the manufacturers of lace were very great, and the use of the machines rapidly extended, while the price of the article was reduced from £5 a square yard to about 5p in the course of 25 years. During the same period, the average annual returns of the lace trade have been at least 4 million sterling, and it gives remunerative employment to about 150,000 workpeople. To return to the personal history of Mr. Heathcote. In 1809 we find him established as a lace manufacturer at Loughborough, in Leicestershire. There he carried on a prosperous business for several years, giving employment to a large number of operatives, at wages varying from 5 to 10 a week. Notwithstanding the great increase in the number of hands employed in lace making through the introduction of the new machines, it began to be whispered about among the workpeople that they were superseding labor, and an extensive conspiracy was formed for the purpose of destroying them wherever found. As early as the year 1811 disputes arose between the masters and men engaged in the stocking and lace trades in the southwestern parts of Nottinghamshire and the adjacent parts of Derbyshire and Leicestershire, the result of which was the assembly of a mob at Sutton, in Ashfield, who proceeded in open day to break the stocking and lace frames of the manufacturers. Some of the ringleaders having been seized and punished, the disaffected learnt caution. But the destruction of the machines was nevertheless carried on secretly wherever a safe opportunity presented itself. As the machines were of so delicate a construction that a single blow of a hammer rendered them useless, and as the manufacture was carried on for the most part in detached buildings, often in private dwellings remote from towns, the opportunities of destroying them were unusually easy. In the neighborhood of Nottingham, which was the focus of turbulence, the machine breakers organized themselves in regular bodies, and held nocturnal meetings at which their plans were arranged. Probably with the view of inspiring confidence, they gave out that they were under the command of a leader named Ned Ludd, or General Ludd, and hence their designation of Luddites. Under this organization machine breaking was carried on with great vigor during the winter of 1811, occasioning great distress, and throwing large numbers of workpeople out of employment. Meanwhile, the owners of the frames proceeded to remove them from the villages and lone dwellings in the country, and brought them into warehouses in the towns for their better protection.